Michael Riley, thank you for joining us at Saturday Night at the Movies.
Thank you for having me.
Did you always know you wanted to be an actor?
Not always. I wanted to be an airline pilot bodybuilder until I was probably like 13 or 14. And then, like a lot of actors, I think I discovered it in high school. I had a drama teacher who was very, usually you get the phys ed teacher with the 2-week course in drama, and you do Oklahoma every year. Well, by the time from grade 9 to 13, I did 28 plays, like for the public, only like 4 or 5 day performances, but I was like 14 and was doing, Henri's Antigone and Shylock and the Merchant of Venice. So it became theater, high school became, because of her, Kate Roberts is her name, it became like a theater school. And so by the time I got to grade 13, I had kind of changed from wanting to be an airline pilot to wanting to be an actor.
Did you get a lot of support from your family when you...
Yeah, my mom and dad are both bankers, and I was the only son. I had 3 sisters, no brothers, and so it was a little alarming, I think, for their only son to come to them and say, "I want to be an actor." But they actually kind of, I brought home all these brochures for different places I wanted to go to, and they sat at the kitchen table and looked at all the brochures and things, and saw the National Theatre School brochure and said, "Well, your mother and I have looked at this, and we think that if you get into this school, obviously there you might have something, and if you don't, I think it's a wonderful thing to do extracurricularly." It was that whole thing, basically.
Did you get into the school?
Yeah, so that became kind of my... It's okay.
Thank you. Thank you for your attention.
Were they happy when you got your choice? Were they hoping that it would be just extracurricular?
I think they were just hoping, like any parent, that something, it was going to be a secure life and that kind of thing. And especially, I think, coming from the bank and having that traditional kind of 9 to 5, metabolism, I think that they worried for me a little bit. But now, of course, they're extremely supportive, and so that was great.
Now, was this in Toronto, or where did you grow up?
I grew up in Burlington, in and around Burlington, Ontario. And because my dad worked in the bank, we got transferred a lot, even a few places within Burlington for a while. But so it was Burlington, and then I went to high school in Burlington. That's where Kate Roberts taught. It was Lord Elgin High School. And then off to Montreal. Yeah.
Well, tell us about your first working gig then.
My first working gig. My first working gig was probably in the middle of theater school. I did a play called Ladies in Retirement at the Piggery Theatre in North Hatley, because Perry Schneiderman, who was one of the acting teachers at the theater school, happened to also run that theater. He was the artistic director of the Piggery. So it was, would you like to, you guys are going home for the summer, how would you like to come out and do a play? And sure, so. And that was a very idyllic way to do a first professional play, because it's, very much, sit by the dock and it must be getting close to 8 o'clock now, I better wander over to the theater. So it's a perfect kind of way to spend a summer. So that was fun.
Now, how did your career transition, go from stage to film?
I don't know. I did a few, like when I got out of theater school, the first thing I did was the Dream in High Park. So I was doing, Shakespeare in the Park. I ended up working in that space a number of times. And, you get out of theater school and you're going to do Shakespeare in front of 2,500 people a night, and it's that was the first job out of theater school, and I thought, this is great. And then you kind of look at the paycheck and you go, we're getting $150 a week. And so 75 had to be spent like just room and board. So I thought, okay, Shakespeare in the Park, it's everything I've been training 3 years for, $75 a week, And then I ended up doing an episode of The Littlest Hobo, and getting paid like $2,300 to say, look at those teeth. And so I kind of in my head at that time thought, okay, I guess you got to work with the dog in order to do the Shakespeare in the Park kind of thing. So that was my little bit of an introduction. Then I kept doing theater for a number of years. And then Perfectly Normal came up with Yves Simoneau, and that was kind of my first feature. And that was really the transition for me, because, and also just the nature of the experience was very, very particular, like I thought all feature films were going to be like that was. But that was around 90, so that was my transition after that. And I did a little bit of theater back and forth, but then by the time I moved to Los Angeles, I was doing mostly kind of film and television. So I'm due back now, actually.
Well, let's talk about the first paycheck you got as a, you mentioned it briefly, but as on camera, on film, you got that big paycheck. What was the first thing you spent it on?
Oh God, probably like debt and student loan and things like that, you know. So I don't remember specifically what that was, but yeah, I don't know. I'd have to go into the records.
And now you've landed this big part with Perfectly Normal. You auditioned for the role?
Yeah, I auditioned for the role, and you know, met Eve Simoneau in the first audition. And what was unique about that experience for me was that, you know, coming from the kind of the conservatory background of the theater and thinking that, you know, film, you just kind of show up and do it. I didn't think a rehearsal process would be any part of the experience. But of course, having gone through the theater school, I was so addicted to the idea of rehearsal and preparation that I remember, like, once I got the job, they say, you've got it, and you're starting in, you know, 6 weeks, I think it was. And I had to learn to sing opera and tend goal. And these were, and wasn't even a very good skater. I could get, like, you know, extracite from the country for saying I didn't skate or play hockey, but I didn't. So that was one of the things I had to learn. And I just remember sitting at home and thinking, I gotta call this director. And it was only like a day after I'd heard that I'd gotten the job. So I figured I'd just be alone for the next, you know, 5-6 weeks preparing. And so I called Eve up and I said, hi, you know, it's Michael. I wondered if I know you're gonna be really busy because you're a director of this film and everything, but is it possible we could sit down together? But, oh no, we're not just sitting down. We're going to be spending the next 5 weeks together. You're coming, you know, tomorrow. And so I spent the next 5 weeks just sitting with him, like poring over at his house, like spending like, you know, 8 hours on 5 pages of dialogue. By the time, and, you know, they set up the opera lessons for me. I went through like 3 opera teachers and all this kind of thing, and was, you know, goaltending at, you know, 4 o'clock in the morning with John Comerford, who was the casting director, took me out, taught me how to tend goal. And even I spent, by the time that principal photography started, I knew, you know, basically like lenses he was going to use. I had music. He'd say, listen to this song. This song is going to be playing under this locale, and this is what this means. I'm going to use this camera move here, and that's going to help evoke this. And we talked about the character, and it just, by the time we got there, we had this immediate kind of shorthand. So I had all the rehearsal that I could have wanted, and it ended up being atypical because films I did after that, of course, I thought that, wow, every feature is going to be like this, but of course it wasn't. So that was my transition from theater into film, and he made it very smooth because he had that kind of work ethic that.
Who got you the audition for it? Was that your agent then?
Yeah, I think what happened in the theater school is we came down with a play called Restoration, and so the third years would mount a play, bring it to Toronto, and then have casting directors and agents and things see it. So it was after that play that my agent, you know, Celia Chassels, who's to this day, I've been with her since 1984, she just came up and handed me a card and said, you know, if you're interested in coming to see me next week, come and see me. And so yeah, I was with the same representation the whole time. And then she's the one that kind of, yeah, got me that audition and got me on the rails for all that.
You know, when I did see Perfect Normal, I did think this man was definitely an avid hockey player.
Oh, that's good.
And was that intimidating to enter the role without those skills?
It was, yeah. I mean, you know, this work is like a liberal education in so many skills that I don't have when I start something, you know. So I've learned a lot of things that I didn't know before, but it wasn't so much the skating, you know. That was just getting over the humiliation of having, you know, about 4 o'clock in the morning, you know, having 8-year-olds go going by you as you're like making your way along the boards, and so that was the hard part of that. But I found the singing, the opera, like learning those Bellini's Norma, like learning that and having to sing it in front of a symphony orchestra when we pre-recorded it. That was the most daunting thing. That was actually a really interesting experience.
I'm still curious about the audition process for Perfectly Normal. Mm-hmm. I mean, you're entering a part that asks you to sing opera and play hockey. Uh-huh. You knew that going into the audition. Right,
but of course I wasn't going to have to play hockey in the audition or sing. I mean, the thing about, I think, the role Eve just wanted to make sure that, there was a territory in which the character sat. I think he wanted to kind of, find out if that's something that I could bring. And we just shared a kind of theatrical vocabulary almost. I mean, I remember, coming to that script was very, it was Eugene Lipinski and Paul Quarrington, adapted this thing together. And it was, the first time that, Turner meets, Renzo meets Alonzo, it's like, in the original script, it's broad daylight in front of the bus terminal, and Turner's wearing a Hawaiian shirt or something, because he's just come back from Florida or Miami or wherever it is. And it's very what it is. And Eve's whole thing was, no, this is about opera inside the world of this guy's head. So, no, it's at nighttime, and Turner's going to appear out of a cloud of smoke in this beautiful suit, and it's going to be walking in slow motion because it's going to be your point of view, and this is all because you see the world through this kind of operatic lens, after your mother died. So you had this whole, even in the audition, those were the things we were talking about. So it was kind of just finding a theatricality together. And so by the time we actually started, he would give images like, I think Renzo, he said, is like a black line on a wall. And he because the world was theatrical enough, he kind of allowed me to kind of go, okay, well then I want the character to be like, I kind of took that physical image and tried to, run with that, with the hair and the clothes and just the way. And the other image I thought was really evocative for me was he said, Renzo, if Renzo walked past a gray wall, he would disappear because he's just that, that kind of a character. And this is going to be his journey of kind of coming out of that space. So the audition, to answer your question, was a lot about just staking out that world together, And I think when we felt we had an affinity for each other, that's what probably helped me get that job.
A bit broader on the same question. Auditions, are they difficult things to do? Are they hard?
Yeah, auditions they're a completely different set of muscles. I mean, they're not. There's so much pretension, or there's so much artifice set up. It's the most unconducive experience to actually do what it is that an actor does. And so you have to develop those set of muscles of going into a room, and it's also falsified. You're reading with someone who's 9 times out of 10 not an actor. It's really like, you do some acting, okay, good. And then I give you this cue line, we do some acting there, okay, good. And I'm going to give you, so you're never really building anything together. When I've learned the most about audition processes, and I did this in Los Angeles quite a bit, where they would say, I wasn't working, and they'd go, how'd you like to go in and be the reader on the Pelican Brief? So I would go in, on that Julia Roberts film, and I would sit on the other side of the table, and I would watch. I'd read, and being an actor, knowing what that's like, I felt an onus to just make sure they had lots to play with, and all that kind of stuff. Just be very generous for them that way. But I learned a lot because you watch actors that I respected and knew, and I go, oh my God, it's that guy. I know him. He's great. And then he would come in and sabotage himself, or be nervous in the same way that any actor is nervous when they come to an audition. And so just learning about what it is that you have to bring into that room, and like I say, it's a very different skill than it is performing. And I don't think that's understood really from the casting point of view. I think, and that's something I also gleaned from sitting there, is you kind of you're waiting for the guy to come in the door. You're waiting for, it's not like you're waiting for a craftsperson to come in and go, this is the kind of chair you have in your script, I'm going to build you this type of a chair. Is that kind of what you're going for? It's not like that. And in a way it should be. They're looking for, Jack to come in the room. Is this Jack? And you haven't even opened your mouth yet to act, and they're deciding whether you're Jack or not. And so this is a very different skill. Fascinating, though.
Are you still asked to do auditions?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I mean, not as much as I did in the, early years. And I mean, I find that, when I get, it's sure a lot easier. I mean, there's probably a certain number of films that I've been offered without auditioning that I might not have gotten if I had to audition. There's something really, because then you're just, I read the script and then we're into a dialogue right away. The auditionness of it is not there. It's not hanging in the room or over in the phone call. It's like, hey, we're going to have to spend, we all know what it's like to spend, 8 weeks in the trenches of making a film or even a piece of television. So we're kind of like auditing each other, and that's more conducive than, like I say, I'd probably lose a lot of the jobs that I've been offered if I had to actually read for them.
What's your relationship with the casting director?
I think the casting director is like, he's like the sentinel at the gate that, that person between you and the director. Certainly in LA, it's very much like if you don't know the casting director, if you're not in their good books, you're never going to get to meet, Steven Spielberg or any of these guys, like they are the ones, it's like the guy outside the door at Oz, But here it's more, and in general, it's more the relationship you want to build is you want to make them look good too. I mean, they know you, they get to know your body of work. A director's coming and seeing you just for this part, but you want a casting director to know you and to know the range that you play in. And I want a casting director to pick up a role and think about me in a great cross section of a cross section of character, So it's that kind of, you building those relationships with casting directors, I think, is important. Because then they kind of get a feel for what you do. And then we'll call you in appropriately,
And do you have a particular one that you have a good relationship? You mentioned one, I think, with Perfectly Normal.
Yeah, John Comerford. Yeah, John's great. And there's a lot, all the casting directors here. I mean, I've been, in this country, I'm kind of, I'm at a point where, generally, I know them, and at that point, I don't even have a lot of contact with them anymore. Celia will say, oh, Susan Forrest called and wants you to come in and I'll go in and I'll never see Susan Forrest, or, so it's different than it was at the beginning when you're kind of pounding the pavement, and it's about making that introduction and making those links, and than it is now. It's different, but it is important at the beginning to definitely, get yourself out there and known by them all.
Tell me a bit about your trip out to LA, or your time out in LA.
Yeah, going to Los Angeles was, and I guess in this country in particular, I'd worked, professionally in the theater for, about 8 years after I graduated from theater school, and then after Perfectly Normal, I got involved in more film and television, started doing feature work. And you get to a point in this country where it was just, there's no, everything's a lateral move, even creatively, not just in a business like building your career, because I've never really thought of the work like that. I've never kind of looked down the road and said, if I do that and work with that person and that person, then I might find myself there in 5 years. I can't think that way. It's just like, where's the character? Like, I'm much more immediate that way. But the one thing that I found was, a decade later, it was like I'd sit in a rehearsal hall and go, oh, yeah, all you guys, hey, Jane, Bob, Doug, right. So there was no sense of newness. There was no sense of even your work creating other work. And so at that time, it was around 89, 90, I kind of said, my wife and I at the time looked at each other and said, okay, England, New York, or Los Angeles. And literally it was those three, and they were equal. Like, it was just going to be, well, if we go to England, we'll try to tap into the theater community. If we go to New York, it's going to be the theater, but also the film and television. LA is very specific. We know what LA is going to be. And it was only because Perfectly Normal was going to be opening down there, and Robbie Coltrane's agent at the time was Susan Smith, and she saw me and said, well, why don't you come down? And I had to do some publicity there anyway. So it was just like a kind of a Yahtzee throw that we chose LA over England or New York. And of course, the 6-month experiment quickly turns into the 8-year odyssey, because that's kind of the way the place works, It's just, time is very strange there.
When you moved there, was that your first venture into LA? Had you seen it before?
No, that's not true, actually. I auditioned for, and it's actually a funny story. I went, it was about 2 years before that, I guess, 2 or 3 years before that. I got a call. I was here working on something, and I got a call when I got home, and my agent said, okay, You're going to LA tomorrow. Pack for 2 days or 3 years. I said, what are you talking about? Well, someone has seen your tape. Then there's this new show called Murphy Brown, and you're going to go down to Los Angeles, and you're auditioning for the young producer, and they really like you, but you have to pack. Like, you might come home in 3 days, but if you don't, you got to stay there and relocate. So it's going to be 3 years. I don't know what I put in a suitcase for 3 years or 3 days. But I remember just like, just putting something in and getting on the plane and getting picked up in the limo and getting dropped at the hotel and doing this whole thing. And it didn't end up getting it, of course. And then you walk out of the studio and the limo's gone, and there's the free bottle of champagne in the room. So I just remember kind of coming home with my tail between my legs, like, well, that was my trip to Oz, and I guess that was it. So I had that feeling in my head. I remember when LA came up again. So, but obviously, going to LA the second time was much more. We drove down with all our worldly possessions strapped on the hood of the car and stayed there for a while.
Yeah, I wonder what it's like for someone up in Canada to be asked to go to all the way down to the States and for an audition. I mean, do you build your hopes up higher? Is that the place you want to work? Or
I think that there's a gravitational pull that growing up in North America that industry and that place has over actors. And so yeah, I think there's a kind of and it was good for me that the experience of the Murphy Brown audition helped me to get that Ozness of the place out of my system in a way, like, because it's all the associations that you have with Hollywood, that I think you need to get out of the way in order to really function down there. And so that experience was a part of doing that for me.
Can you talk about what some of those associations are?
Well, it's Hollywood. It's that white sign on that hill. It's every movie star that you've ever grown up, whoever your heroes happen to be. You go, oh my God, they're all from there. They've all worked there. That's if you were deep into martial arts, you'd have to go to Japan, to really, and there's some way I think that actors grow up in North America and think, you have to go to Hollywood if you really want to be an actor, And I don't think it's necessarily about holding that gold statuette or something, or whatever your thing is. I think there's a Mecca kind of feeling about that place. And 8 years later, it is just a place. I mean, and in a lot of ways, I kind of reached my threshold for being able to tolerate a lot of things about the place. But in the beginning, for sure, it's got that aura around it.
So why return to Canada? What made you move back here?
I did a series. It was Power Play that brought me back, and like I said, it was kind of timed out with my daughter who was born there was about to enter the school system, and her mom and I kind of thought, do we really want her to enter the Los Angeles school system? So it was kind of a little bit of both. And then when the offer came up to do Power Play, I mean, I wouldn't have gotten that kind of an offer there to do that kind of a part, with that kind of writing, and so. Yeah, it was a decision to just come back. I kept my representation there, and I've gone back for pilot seasons and things, and still have my green card and all that stuff. But, it was good to come home.
Yeah, Paul, Power Play, Paul Quarrington connection again.
Yeah.
Can you talk about your relationship with specifically Paul Quarrington and generally with screenwriters?
Well, Paul, as you know, was perfectly normal, and he was great too on Power Play because there was Paul has that very unique kind of sensibility that's highly theatrical and very imaginative. I always kind of knew when it was a Paul Quarrington script, So yeah, I have a lot of respect for Paul and all the writers on that. I mean, it was a very anomalous experience because it was a very the producers were very hands-on, and the writing was of a standard that was really fun to play. And in terms of relationships with screenwriters, a lot of the films that I've done are first time. A lot of them, I'd say 70% of them probably are first-time filmmakers. They wrote the script, and so your relationship with them is very specific first time out. It's not like an established William Goldman kind of, oh my God, relationship with that kind of a screenwriter. It's more like, you're going to be directing this, you're casting me, you wrote the script, and so you get to know the person. The relationship kind of unfolds during the pre-production and the shooting of the film. So most of my experiences with screenwriters are that. which becomes more about the question of, what that relationship is with first-time directors and directors in general. But yeah, aside from Paul, and I know a lot of people who write screenplays, but I don't. Usually, it's very much attached to something you're working on.
If you had took a character, do you ever want to change the character yourself? And how does that work with the screenwriter or with the director, for that matter?
Yeah, no. I mean, that's kind of that's a kind of multi-layered question, because in theater school, in the way that I've kind of been indoctrinated to think about through teachers that I've had to think about that relationship, you go out to the character. You don't. There's nothing you do to the character to put it into my comfort zone. So I would never deign to change something about that. My job is to find out as much about what that is, and then let me come to it. So I would never. So that's kind of sacrilege in my head to think that way. Although once you get involved in something, there is kind of an organic process between you and the director and that entity that is the character that evolves. But yeah, it's very much, especially when you're shooting a film, it's like you write one film and you shoot a second film and you edit a third film, and the character is inherent, right at the very beginning. But there is an evolution of what has to happen to make it through the preparation of that first film, bring it to life in that second thing, and then the character is going to have another transition that I'm not even going to be in control of in that third process. So, I've always thought of film as like, this little bird comes out of the breast of the writer and is handed over to the next person and handed over to the next person, and like 50 people, including craft service, and it's like Coppola says the projectionist has the final cut, right down to the projectionist. That bird's got to pass through a lot of hands, and hopefully it's been handled well enough that it can go like that at the end. Some birds just go like that because they've been overhandled, but so I've always that to me, the collaboration of that kind of a process is part of the draw and the love of doing this work, because it's a medium where it's got every artistic discipline in it. It's got painting and photography and dance and music, and everything's just being churned up into this one pot that kind of appeals to my.
Picking up on the bird analogy, after all those hands helping the bird, what do you think then when you see on the screen a credit that says "a film by"?
There is, I think, two things about that. I mean, it should be a film by this huge list of people that hold the bird, and I guess that's what the credits are about. But there is, the director is the eye of the hurricane. I mean, he has this overall vision that has to be adhered to. Like I remember watching Eve. It was such a liberal education. Watching him on that, on Perfectly Normal, just be basically at the center of people coming to say, well, what color do you want the windowsill in the bathroom to, this location scout, and all the ability to answer all those questions and be able to get the people that are going to be handling the bird on the right page, because he's the one, and I guess if I'm going to draw the analogy, he's deciding what kind of bird it is. He's saying, the writer and I have decided that this is a red-tipped sparrow or whatever, and now does everyone know what this red-tipped sparrow is, and it's up to him to kind of communicate. So I think the ability to communicate that clearly deserves the credit of film by, I suppose. But for sure, it's like awards or anything that takes apart something that's meant to be cohesive, to me, is a little antithetical when it comes to such a collaborative medium.
Well, someone like Eve's.
Michael, could you just play your collar up a second?
Mm-hmm.
That's good. Thank you.
Yeah.
I could see where someone like Eves might have earned that. A first-time director getting the film by credit. Are you still comfortable with that?
Yeah. Like that, I've never really thought about it in that way before. So as long as the experience itself is, it's like billing. Like, if my agent says to me, okay, but you're not going to be top of card, but you'll be second top of card, I don't care. I'm in the film. Like, if people are going to go, oh, well, you weren't top of card, like, to me, like, that stuff, yeah, whatever. Just come down, lights go down, have the experience, and this is a film by, good, okay. Once upon a time, what? It's what happens after that to me, really makes a difference anyway.
What did you think? I believe Perfectly Normal opened the Toronto Film Festival. Opened or closed?
Opened it, yeah.
How did that affect the success of that film?
I think it's a great honor to open the festival, and for a Canadian film to open an international film festival. It was great for the film. It kind of launched it, ended up playing, some record-breaking 10 months at the Carlton or something. But just the festival circuit in general is a great place for, especially in this country, for independent films, to see. That's sometimes that is the light of day that they see, sadly, in this country, because we don't have this infrastructure to really, support and market our films in the way that we should. But so the festival for me, like, if I work very hard on an independent film, and like most of the films that I've done, probably got the audience that saw them was through festivals. So I think it's really important, especially in this country.
Have you been to other festivals since? Have any of the films been involved with?
Oh yeah, I mean, most of the films I've done have gone through the festival circuit. Opened in Montreal, done Toronto, done, there's so many festivals now. Like, oh hey, I did a film called Mile Zero, and they say, oh, we're going to Japan, we're doing this, we're going that. Oh great. And you kind of hear about you're busy working on something else, and you hear, oh god, the baby's now gone to university and it's going off to school, and the life that the film is having is like, and the festival circuit is very much a part of that.
What's it like for yourself as an actor being at a festival? The way you're treated, your personal experience?
Well, the first time for Perfectly Normal was the first film festival I think I'd ever been to, and it was the opening of the film festival. I didn't have, at the time, I think I was doing a play, so I had like, curly permed hair and glasses and a mustache at the time. I couldn't have been more un-Renzo-like. And I lost my pass. I had my tuxedo and everything, and they weren't going to let me in. And I'm sorry, you can't come in. And my wife is like, he's Renzo. He's the one in the film. He's there, that's opening the festival. I'm sorry, sir, if you don't have your gold I want it all pass, you don't get in or whatever. So that was my first experience about how I was treated at a festival. But normally, yeah, it's great. I mean, it's also a very specific inbuilt audience. They're a very friendly bunch for the most part. I mean, it's definitely within an industry. This industry is celebrating its work together. So I've always had a good feeling, because doesn't need to be commercially blah, 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 all that stuff. It's more like, it's about the film. It is Projectionist has the final cut. Here we are. We all know how films are made. We all know how hard it is for the bird to pass all the way and fly at the end. So, my God, I hope this bird flies. I generally get that feeling when I'm at a festival, which is great.
Big stars, are they essential to the success of a festival, or can they take away from the film?
I think that unfortunately it can be seen as their presence can be seen as being salient to the success of the festival or not. But I don't think that's true. I think it's the films that we come to see there. But I don't know. Maybe that's too. I know there's if Alec Baldwin comes into town, we're going to draw certain attention to the thing. But that's just maybe to get more bums on velvet watching the lights go down for the experience anyway. So. I don't know. I guess I don't think it's one way or the other. I don't think it affects the film or that feeling in an audience one way or the other.
Yeah, even though you live in a big festival city, do you have a favorite festival?
Toronto. Yeah, I mean, I like the Toronto Festival. I think it's changed over the years. Sundance is a very specific kind of festival. I loved going there. Because every festival too has its kind of world that surrounds it. The festival in Montreal is a very specific to that city and the feel of that city. Toronto is very much its own feel. I think each of them have their own specific kind of world. Plane.
Just way back in all day? Is it a biplane?
It's not too
We
late.
saved the scene for you. Where did I leave off? We're talking about festivals. Right, you have a favorite. Oh, you mentioned Toronto has changed. How has the Toronto Festival changed?
I think it's, as you were saying, I think it's become more star-driven in a way. It's become more Americanized. It's an international film festival, and it's set in Toronto. So there's the two things are, I guess I would just, like to see the Canadian film contingent treated with at least equal respect in an international film festival in Toronto. And I feel like sometimes, it's more about, that Alec is coming into town than it is about, what it is that we're there to do and what it is that we're there to celebrate and pay honor to. So I think and like anything, I think when something gets big and something gets, starts to get more attention around it, then it becomes subsidized and other factors start to come into play. But it's like anything. I think the core reason for having it has to be, kept clear in everybody's head, or otherwise it runs that risk, I think.
I'm asking you to be a bit speculative now. If Perfectly Normal hadn't had a festival to play at, would it have found its wings?
Found its wings, exactly. Yeah, I'm not sure about the fact that that it opened the Toronto Festival, whether that made a 10-month run in the Carlton, and that's in one theater too. See, that's typical. It opens the festival, runs for 10 months in one theater. That's just, there's something wrong with that picture right away. But I think, probably it had the exposure of it, we hear about it, it's like Last Wedding, it opens the festival, so that's the first time I heard of that, and so that prompted me to see the film. So I think that for sure there's a correlation, but I don't think it's, I guess there is a correlation for there, but I don't know how strong it is though.
You brought up something interesting. Last Wedding, of course, was renowned for not getting an audience, even though it was a great film.
Right.
Does Canadian films have a chance over American films, even in Canada?
They don't have the same chance because there isn't that same machinery behind them to have them seen. You look at a budget breakdown for a film, any film that's shot in Hollywood, you're gonna. It's like that's why Men with Brooms was such a coup for Paul and Robert, because it was they knew that they took what was important from that industry and went, you know what, we're going to make this film, we're going to have the bird go through the hands, but we're going to make sure this has an audience, and we're going to pay the money to make these many prints to be seen in 1,000 screens. We're going to, it's like that part of the. It's like if it is a child, it's like saving up for its fun to go to university. Like you can nurture this baby and it can be everything you want it to be. But if you have no money to send it off to school, then what was the point? Like I think that you need to, that machinery and that the world of what happens to the film once we've got it in the can is important. And that there's in LA that's just so built into the. They might even have a bad film. And they just know that, hey, if we make it back on our first weekend, it's like the pendulum swings. Like that's not healthy either. But there's something to be gleaned from both. If you make that first box office weekend, even if it's a piece of, it doesn't matter. Like if it makes its money back, then okay, good. Then we just keep going. The money tap will continue to run. But yeah, certainly, it would be great if in this country there was more of more of a relationship with the distribution of that a film that you do that because like so many films I have done, as I say, are I'm proud of them as films, but I know that short of the festival circuit they won't get an audience because they just won't. And it's not that they don't deserve an audience, and it's not that there's not an audience out there that would enjoy them. It's just that audience needs to be, located and targeted and spoken to and communicated with, to let them know that the film is going on.
Now you have worked with some powerful people. You mentioned getting through Spielberg's gate with Amistad.
Right.
Can you talk about working on that film, working with Spielberg?
I mean, really, Amistad, I was basically ended up being a glorified extra, but what happened, it was more the process of, auditioning for it. I auditioned for a part that was quite significant, and just the opportunity to audition for a Steven Spielberg, film was great. And so I ended up, it was like, I did the audition, it was like 3 weeks later, you kind of forget about it. And then literally my agent kind of went, you get home and you get that, what part, again, a part of what actors got to dream about. Well, Steven Spielberg called, what? And he really liked you, but he can't cast you in that part. He's casting somebody else that he knows, but he just really wants you to be a part of the film, would love you to come on and play this role if you think that's okay. And so, I would have swept floors at that point I wanted to just be a part of that experience. And so it was an incredible, just the nature of what we were shooting too. It was my first feeling of what the scope of how truly incredible, immense that machine is there. Like I arrived, to set, which was this first, airport hangar size set that was really just a base camp to get into a boat and go out to what I thought were going to be these big ships that we were going to be shooting on. Well, we didn't go to the ships. We went to five big, huge flatbed boats. Again, like 4 acres worth of this floating set. Again, another set out in the middle of just where it had, makeup trailers on top of each other and another, base camp, and the size of the thing was amazing. And then getting on another boat to actually go over to film. And so, I basically said, I think, aye, sir, or whatever it is I did that day. But just to be around him was great. And at the end of the day, he said, well, you and my friend, come back on our boat when we go back together. And he was like everything I thought he would be. He's very much like he's got a youthful kind of, passion about what he does, And it's infectious. You see it kind of infect the set of, he loves what he does, it always reminds me of that phrase that, you don't sell what you do, you sell your love for what you do. And being around someone like that, he personifies that. He sells his love for what he does.
How does he direct? Is he hands-on, or is he just kind of...
He's hands-on, but it's hands-on in a very organic way. You don't feel like a puppet or anything like that. It's very, And I didn't have the kind of role that would demand, that kind of communication. But watching him, and even the way, I think the proof of the pudding is watching him deal with kids. He's so, he allows them to be who they are, and there's something very wonderful about, every time you see a child in a Steven Spielberg film, it's you really see that what he draws, what he's able to draw out of them by that love for what he does. So yeah, he's great, obviously.
Similarly, you were in a film with 2 very well-known people, French Kiss, Meg Ryan and Kevin Kline.
Yeah.
Anything to tell us about that film? About those people?
Yeah, again, it was, I had a scene at a desk which probably would, in a Canadian film, it would be like, 2 pages in a 10-page day that you'd finish in an hour and a half. But I sat at that desk for 2 days, and just basically sat there with her, and she's great. She's exactly what you think she's going to be, just very affable and nice. And I was brought there. We shot in Paris, so it was like, to me, it was like, and we got first class return tickets, and so my wife and I kept the return ticket open-ended. So shot a couple of days with Meg Ryan, hung out with her, and she would between takes go, where you guys should go? You should go here, you should go there. We just talked about travel plans for the rest of my trip, and then we just took off, and so it was a great experience. And again, and Lawrence Kasdan too was very the same way. It's like in Los Angeles, it kept, when I worked with those 2 specifically, I had this image of, Los Angeles is so huge, and in any community, artistic community, there's like a core group of those people that you want to work with. Those people. And then there's this huge periphery that you have to wade through of everybody else, in a way. And the place is so huge that you kind of like, and there's a certain insanity in that periphery. And then and you got to kind of swim through that to get to the sanity again. Like you think that, I don't know if I'm, explaining this right, but by the time you get to work with Steven Spielberg, although there's so much, also it's so rife with icon, like there's so much, about him and about, Steven Spielberg that by the time you get there, he's just a guy who loves to make films, and same with Lawrence Kasdan. And there's a kind of like, you kind of have to shake it off when you get in those rooms and go, oh yeah, it's a set, and there's lots of more money, that's for sure, but it's a set, and people are doing their jobs, and it's just real again, And so just even that about the experience was great. And I know, my friend, a very good friend of mine, Henry Cherney, he's done a couple of big American films, and just hearing his experiences too, and I got to meet a couple of the people that he was working with, and it is just real again. The veil that through which we see them is kind of lifted, and you go, oh, Harrison Ford, he's just it's a nice guy, very affable, and so there's something that's something interesting about that, the perceptions that we have beforehand, and then what it really is.
Is there ever the case that I think Woody Allen says, never meet your heroes?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, if they've fulfilled their role for you as being a hero, if they've, there are actors like growing up as a young actor looking at, the Al Pacinos and the Daniel Day-Lewises and the Robert De Niros and the Gary Oldmans and I look at them, I haven't met any of them, but they've already fulfilled their heroic function for me. So even if I met them and they were jerks, it wouldn't really, that's okay, that's too bad for you, but it's okay, and I'm, because they already, I don't think you have to meet your heroes for them to do what they need to do for you. And so it wouldn't affect one way or the other for me if they weren't everything that I thought they were. Because in a way, it's their work. I mean, I don't need to know them in a way. It's the other thing, it's like Jack Nicholson said in an interview, I don't want people to know me because it makes my work harder. It's like it makes doing what you do. Because there's a certain, being an actor, there's a certain kind of illusion you're trying to pull off every time where I don't want them to look at Michael. I want them to become engaged and drawn in, compelled by Jack's journey or whoever it is. And if so much time is spent, on what Michael eats for breakfast, it just makes this job harder, I think. But
Well, I'd be interested in knowing about people who want to get to know you, like after seeing Perfectly Normal, Power Play. People, your experience of fame.
I don't really. I think you definitely have associations that you leave behind for certain projects, especially when you first start out. Like after Perfectly Normal, I was given a lot of scripts that were, kind of like Bud Cort's character in Harold and Maude, like very much kind of like, there was a script about a mortician who sang opera. And you get all those, well, this is Renzo over and over again, so certainly you leave a wake from whatever you do. I mean, I did, there's a good example. When I was in California, I did 2 movies of the week back to back. And one of them I played a serial rapist, and the other one I played a man who becomes a dog. It was called Dogmatic. And very Disney-esque, kind of very flat-out physical comedy, and I had an equal fun time doing both of them. But I just remember the attitudes of people on set. For the serial rapist, I had these hair extensions and everything, and people on set would go, "Hey, you scare my dog every time you walk by. You're scaring my dog," and then what you'd get on set in between takes, and they say, "So yeah, you're really into this. Do you do comedy at all?" Yeah, I've done comedy, and really, they just can't picture it, And then you're in Dogmatic and you're falling all over cardboard boxes and things, and people go, wow, you're really funny. Have you ever done drama? Yeah, I've done drama before, So you kind of like, you leave a wake of that. So, I think a lot of people, in power play, that the Brett Parker in that. But for the most part, I just, I don't even know if I have a relationship with fame because I don't think that exists in this country in a way. But you definitely leave those associations,
What about when people stop Mike O'Reilly on the street? What role do they recognize you?
Well, a lot of times they don't, Like I'll get a lot of times like, I know you from somewhere, or you'll get that a lot, and sometimes depending on what mood I'm in, I'll just leave it at that. Yeah, I don't know. I would look like your brother or something because it's, just easier. Well, you might have noticed me from television, Like it just doesn't feel right to me. So, but sometimes, yeah, Brett Parker a little bit, especially if I was in Hamilton, I'd get that. But for the most part, people just go, hey, I saw that, I saw that film you were in. That was great. I really liked that film. And there's nothing better, And it's not like I'm never accosted or anything like that. I don't even know what that would be like and whether that would be even a price to pay for getting to do what I love to do. But my little experience with it has been nothing but, gracious for the most part.
That part of you that doesn't want people to, that doesn't say, oh, you might recognize me from television. Is that sort of a Canadian thing? We just don't...
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, they say that Robert De Niro can walk around Tribeca and just people will just not, And I don't think it's whether, he's just like this permanent fixture and like, leave him alone. I think it's a part of it is if you don't draw that attention to yourself, then you won't get that attention. You can be like Renzo. You can be invisible if you choose to be. And I don't know whether that's particularly Canadian. For me, it's just, that's what I do. It's getting stopped on the street once in a while when it happens is a byproduct of doing what you do, but it's certainly not something that's really a part of, or really, it's not attached to any reason why I do what I do, And I don't think that's, Canadian or American. That's just, for me as an actor, that's just the way I feel about that,
Playing the serial rapist, as opposed to playing in Dogmatic. What's it like to play the villain, and how do you approach it?
Well, the villains are obviously, you pick up the script and there is a certain amount of actor salivation that goes on for the villain, because the villain is, there's a theatricality usually to the villain, and there's something, for an audience that we enjoy. We enjoy being taken on that journey. Oh my God, I hope he doesn't do that, or the something that's fun to watch about someone turned with their screws turned down that way. So there's certainly a lot of you get a lot of joy out of jumping into that kind of, to putting on the cloak, the figurative cloak, But in a way, I don't find it any different than. It's the same journey. I mean, I worked just as hard playing the dog. I had just as much preparation in learning to do that than I did for that. It was just a completely different set of, it's like being in theater school and going, this is a restoration play and this is a Chekhov. Like they're just same beasts but completely different, processes. And those two are the same. And one's not easy and one's not difficult. They're both difficult, But yeah, villains are. I've done that a few times, I guess. I'm due for a good villain.
Do you have a favorite villain character that you have played?
On stage, I did Bond's Restoration, and Lord R. He's kind of he was a very theatrical kind of like. He salivated at his own villainy, which was fun to play. So yeah, that was a particularly heightened one for me. Yeah.
We are doing a show on villains, so I'd be curious if there's any villains. So you can think about who your favorite villain is, didn't you?
Yeah, and I didn't come up with much, really.
Of course, and if you don't have an answer, it's just like, no.
Yeah, I can't think of one specifically.
Okay. Are we rolling on this?
Yep.
Okay. Did you want me to move from that question?
Yeah, I can't think of one specifically.
If one comes to you,
Okay.
no.
I mean, I certainly like, the ones that are reveled in, like watching, what I see the other day, I saw Al Pacino in Scarface, or when Gary Oldman has his, turn at a villain, there's something that you see them reveling in it, or, Anthony Hopkins in The First Silence of the Lambs. There's something that's taking the theatricality of the thing and really, playing that, going there, and all the great villains in Shakespeare were written with that kind of theatricality as a part of who they were. There's a great charisma to good villains, and so watching those guys do that it's always fun.
What about death scenes? Have you done them?
Yeah, any scene that's not going well is a death scene. I don't know if I have done a death scene. I know I've done it on stage a number of times. I don't know if I've ever died on film. Well, I've died on film a lot. But no, I can't think of one. I think I've been involved in projects where, my character dies, but you don't actually see it happen. I'm kind of like, there's so much cliche around the death scene. It's like, to me, there's so many inherent traps in doing that final kind of thing just before I go. One of those. So I'm probably glad that I haven't had an opportunity to do one yet. It would have to be be pretty specific. If I was going to die, I'd like to die in some really spectacular way.
What are some of the cliches for a death scene? You did one for us, but
Here, I will now do a series of cliches for, I don't know. There's just it's always that the last, the end of someone's life it's never like you think it's going to be. And I think there's a lot of, like I've been at the side of, I've been at deathbeds in real life, and they're never like what you see. There's something so hyper real about when it really happens. That's when you think of any scene you've seen in a movie, or most things that you read, and someone's final words, or someone's, don't leave me, Bob, don't leave me, all those. There's something, I think there's artifice to be peeled away at, depending on how the thing is written. But there are, it's like there's a universal sound to a death scene, that I think has to be made specific in order for it to be grounded in something real. It's like love scenes. Love scenes are they're exactly the same thing for me. There's an artifice around a love scene, and the only way, and it's the same danger inherent for me. Like I get little red flag. You look at the death scene, love scene. They're things that are riddled with cliche, and that you have to. To me, a love scene, the most important thing about a love scene is it has to be a scene. It's not just, this montage of body parts. It has to be integral. It's still a scene between two people. Even if it's silent, even the physicality between two people, there is something in the way in which those two characters make love in this particular situation, and the dialogue that happens between them, and that is full of everything about who they are. And if that's not in the scene, then it just becomes the universal sad thing of people making love, and we've seen that 1,000 times. And I think death scenes are the same way. Like what is specifically happening between that person who's heading off to we know not where, and the people that person is leaving behind, or the people that person isn't leaving behind, or it becomes extremely, extremely specific and extremely, extremely heightened. And I think the specificity and the heightenedness of shuffling off this mortal coil is really has to really be specific, and has to be very. Otherwise, it will. If you don't do that kind of work on those scenes as a writer and as an actor and as a director and everybody else, then they become things we've seen before.
Mike, can you just play a caller?
Again, it's doing that thing.
yeah. I wonder if there's a sort of the same sort of trepidation when you're asked to do, and again, I'm not sure if you have done a nude scene.
Yeah, it is the same. It's the same thing, you know. It just has to be for a reason that's augmenting and complementing the thing itself, and it has to be specific. If the thing is just about being nude, then obviously there's no reason to have it there. There should be a nakedness about every role that one plays, and so if the person has to be physically naked, it shouldn't be this, it shouldn't be seen as this extra thing, or it's not. Then if it is seen like that, then it hasn't been woven into, the reason for it itself. You know what I mean? Like I had to do in Mustard Bath, I had to do a masturbation scene in that film, and I had to do at the dream sequence at the beginning. It was well, he's naked when he goes and lies down beside his mother, and he's having this really intense dream when he wakes up in Guyana for the first time. And to me, that was just he had to be. It was so much a part of the dream. It was so much a part of his the place where he was, and the man who is the boy, who is the fetus, going back. It just made so much sense in terms of his psychology that he would not have clothes on in that scene. So as long as it's inherent to part of the piece, then I never have any problem with that.
You've done a lot of work with television, both MOWs and series. Is that much different than working in film? I'd actually like to rephrase my question. Is it much different working in film than it is the other way around, with the stress on film?
They're, on the one hand, they're the same thing. In the same way that I even think that, acting, preparing a character for the stage and preparing a character for film is essentially, with the different technical demands and pushed through the filter of different mediums, but they're essentially the same kind of work. So I could also draw a large circle around film and television as a whole like that. The constraints of television specifically are time. It's like working on Power Play was, the thing has to be 47 minutes and 17 seconds. The rest of the hour is commercial. You do it in 8 days. It's built to the act breaks. Television is just a machine that has an inevitability about how quick it has to move. Not that a film set doesn't, but a film set is more, especially independent films are, you still got to do the thing that normally would take 50 days. You're shooting it in 23. So there's always that feel, but there's just something more, you're not under, it's not a producer's medium. You're not under that kind of, manufactured thing that's going to be going out in the same way. So it is different. But essentially, when the camera's rolling and that character is in that situation, whether that TV camera is going to be putting you on 30 feet high or 20 feet across the room, that moment essentially is the same.
What about the security of a television series? How does that change your life?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly something that the actor's not used to doing. There's a built-in recession to what an actor's life is. You just employment followed by unemployment in this never-ending kind of wave. And so when a television gig comes up, it's much like going to Stratford for 8 months. It's like, okay, I know where I'm going to be. Like this is what I'm doing. And there's a certain 9-to-5-ness about that is rare for an actor, and depending on who the actor is, it could be good or bad. I mean, I thought it was one of the hardest things that I've ever done because for a couple of reasons, but you're playing the same character day in, day out, and to me, that was difficult to keep that interesting for me to get up in the morning, and also it's hard work, like it is your life does have to kind of go on hold. And on the feature film, it goes on hold for 5 weeks, but on the series, I'll see you in September, and it's June now. And because it is a beast that eats, 57 pages a week, and you got to feed that thing, and you're on set at, first thing in the morning, and you got another, 15 pages to memorize for the next day, and You're preparing, for in power play, it was always, you're always working on 3 fronts. Like once it's up and running, you're working on the current episode. I'm worrying about how they're going to cut the one that we just did. And so I'm trying to walk by the editing room whenever I could, and trying to get this one, have your feature film sensibility about trying to make this one everything it can be, and then you're being handed the pink pages on the thing you're going to start the day after that ended for the next process. And so you're always, it was, and the only way I could think of about doing it was to, in a kind of a, I think we all kept the bar really high for ourselves. And it was hard. It was difficult, and so the security that it gave financially, or the security of going, knowing that you were working, and didn't necessarily balance with how hard it was.
Was there ever a point that you thought, I just might not work again?
Oh, you always think that. I always think, no matter what I'm working on, I always. Right now I'm unemployed, and I hope that work comes, and it seems to have in the years past, but I don't know, I think that's kind of that's neuroses, I think, is sewn into an actor's head, no matter what, I have, you're waiting for the cloud to loom and go, yeah, see, I knew I wasn't going to work again. But, and certainly after, when you're working on a television series, you hope that the association, and maybe that was more your question, the association with being Brett Parker, being a sports agent, is going to be like, now that a lot of people have seen you do that, that's all you're going to be allowed to do. And so, and there's that little fear in your head, but no, it was a good gig, that's for sure.
How do you spend your time now, that you are in between gigs?
Well, I have, one child and 2 stepchildren and a dog, so life is kept pretty busy. And, when you're not working, you're looking for work. And, as we were talking about auditioning is a whole, I did like 3 auditions last week. And, by the time a week goes by, preparing different things and keeping your real life running, it's like, that's the life of an actor that week, It wasn't spent on set, but it was spent, working.
How do you look for work? Or do you leave that up to your agent?
Yeah, it's kind of a process of the agent kind of is fielding things and sending you scripts and what about this, and for me now, I'm entering a point in my career where at the same time that is taking care of itself, I need to be able to, I'm in the process of trying to look for a Canadian novel, or look for a series of novels that I could adapt into a screenplay, or that kind of thing, that I just that can keep me occupied as well. And also, if that can happen, then I can be one of the people at the head of the line who's handing the bird, and not just the guy in the middle, Like acting, especially acting in a television series, it's kind of like, or even acting in a film. The role of an actor generally in the medium of film or television is kind of like, playing a half a period in the second period of a major playoff hockey game. The outcome of the game is being played out and decided long before you arrived, and it's going to be played out and decided long after you leave. And all you can really do is get on the ice in the time that they've given you in that second period and just skate like crazy, get as many assists as you can, and get off, because the thing is being, you're a part of a small process. An important but a small process. To me, the idea of finding a piece of material that I can generate, gives me some more time in the first period, and some more time in the third period that I think actors covet when they spend so much time just in that middle part. And I know a lot of directors, film directors, that I respect are actors who have gone, okay, I'm gonna take my hand at this. I'm gonna take my hand at this, because you're around it a lot. It doesn't mean that that you necessarily be any good at it, but I think that idea for some control is something that actors crave after a while.
Yeah, I wonder how it must have felt playing leads here in Canada, and then going to the States and doing parts where you,
Yeah.
you say, I captain.
Yeah. Well, there are no small parts, only small actors, first of all. And no, that's, it's in some ways, it's a lot harder to do the smaller parts. It's easy, as hard as I just said it is to play Brett Parker 16 hours a day for 6 months. It's very difficult. But I would look around me at the actors that were the day players, people that were coming on for 2 days in that episode. And they really have the harder job creatively in a way, because it's like, here I go, I'm just like the man of 1,000 analogies, but it's like jumping on a train that's already moving, like this thing is moving along and you got to jump on at the speed that the train's moving and then jump off the moving train too. I get to sit on the train. I've been here since we left Union Station, and that's easier than, okay, what is the style of your show? Like coming on as a guest or a few days in the film, there's so much you don't know about the world that you're supposed to fit in. What is my function in this world? Because I haven't been along for the whole ride, and you end up, with other actors outside your trailer going, "What's this scene about? Do they want this? Like, is there any style? This is, you're having these discussions that are inherent of being a part of playing the day player. It's a harder thing to do."
What advice would you give to?
Can we hold on 1 sec? We're just gonna let Shereen step up and come.
Advice to someone starting out, I think it would come back to that idea of you don't sell what you do, you sell your love for what you do. Being that, make sure you love it before you start, because just because of the sacrifices inherent in it, and it's not an easy thing to do, and it will make demands on your life. And you're going to have to develop a thick skin to do with rejection and all that. So make sure that you love it, and then and perseverance furthers. As the I Ching says. You just be tenacious about it. Like one of the things that I remember my theater teacher in high school saying to me is that she said, and I'm like 17 years old at the time. I had gone that transition from wanting to be the airline pilot into I think I'll be an actor. And she says, "Well, just so you know that you'll never be finished. You'll never be an actor." And I said, "What do you mean?" She says, "Well, you're never going to be done. Like if you're on your deathbed and you would have lived another 24 hours, you would have seen something in your world, read a book, caught a sight of something on the street, had an experience in your own life that would have filled you up more and made any role that you've done previously." It's an ongoing process. It's going to be, her analogy actually, she probably started me on the road to analogy, but she said it's like opening up a door with a hallway that has infinite doors, and you go, wow, so this is the life of an artist, and you walk down that hallway and you open up one of the first doors, and it's another hallway with infinite doors, and you realize in that moment that I'm never going to get all these doors open. So it's not about that. It's about the process of what doors I'm going to choose, and my path of least resistance through this work. And so that idea stuck with me, that it's never going to end, that it is a process, and to engage in the love of the process is I guess the advice I would give.
If you can go back in time and meet Michael Riley as a very young man,
run. No.
Was there one particular event that you would warn yourself about?
Wow. Oh my God. Well, there's probably like a book of them. Chapter 1. I don't know that I would warn myself about. No, there have been things that have happened in my life that were sad or difficult and that came as a great surprise. But I don't know if I would want to be warned about them. You know what? I just, part of the process, again, is that, I needed to be, there was a reason why, the universe decided to blindside me with that event, because then the process is about, okay, how do I assimilate that event, when someone in your life passes away, or when, whatever it is, I don't think I would want to be warned. I think that kind of defeats the purpose of why we're here. It'd be like characters, it's like, to bring it back to an acting analogy, it's like characters don't know what's going to happen to them in any given moment, and that's what makes them interesting to play. And that's the illusion of creating someone who does not know what their future holds, is when in fact, when everyone in that line handing the birds knows what their future holds, to be in that space where they don't is part of what makes it fun to play and fun to watch. So I think that's true for life and for art.
Do you happen to have a favorite film?
No, that would be like, no, I can't say there's like one film that captures that for me. I have a lot of films that I love, but I don't have a favorite. No.
Can you name me 3 films you love?
That's it. Even that is hard, Like, there's all the standards kind of come up, like, Raging Bull. Yeah, I love Raging Bull, but I also like Harold and Maude, and I love being there, Like, depending on what mood I'm in, it's like, those are 3 films that I really, really enjoy, and I've seen more than once. But I think if someone said to me, you could only watch, you're going to live on a desert island, you can only take 1 film with you, I think I'd have to say, then don't bother then. I'll just go without the VCR, thanks.
How about this? A guilty pleasure, a film you know is bad, but when no one else is around, you watch it. Well, actually, maybe not that film, but...
Well, guilty pleasure film. I don't know. If I like it, I'll, I love the Rocky series. I used to, growing up, that was very, I like the myth of those things, like those were very inspirational films for me growing up, watching those. I remember seeing it in a theater for the first time. Would I call that a guilty pleasure film? Nah, it's good. I don't, it doesn't have to be kind of highbrow for me to admit that it's, it's okay to watch. So I don't think I have any guilty pleasure films, I like, like I went to see Spider-Man, and it's not like going to see, some other films that I've seen in the last little while, but it's, oh yeah, I guess you could say Spider-Man's a guilty pleasure film, like all that money on the screen, there it is, cool, bring on the popcorn. I think there's a, entertainment value to all that for sure. But again, I wouldn't necessarily call it a guilty pleasure, just a pleasure.
What do the movies mean to you?
I think that we've all, when you talk to a lot of actors about the genesis of them becoming performers, you always have the, you always hear the inevitable thing of, I used to like work like crazy sweeping up behind my dad's counter to make $5 to go to the movies. Because there's something about there's a dream-like quality. I think movies affect us the same way that dreams affect us. And and in a way they're structured similarly in terms of how they play with time and space. But when the lights go down in that dark room with a whole lot of people around sharing that same experience, and this thing 30 feet high starts to lead you on the mythical hero's journey of whatever that particular film is about, there's something really powerful in that. And that's something that holds also great responsibility. These are the shamans, the storytellers of art. It's like sitting around the campfire, and we come with the same kind of suspension of disbelief and desire to be transported somewhere that we can then take back to that's our special world, that we can take something from that special world and bring it back to all our ordinary worlds. And that pull, I think, is really important and really powerful. It has been ever since, movies began.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.